The royal family rocked by the release of Paul Burrell's bombshell new book. We're going to analyze the biggest claims and work out what's fact and what's fiction in this episode where I team up with Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network. But the most recent revelation that the Daily Mail serialized from this new book, A Royal Insider, was headlined, "I'd like to see my Platinum Jubilee. Can you keep me alive for that?" And this is Paul Burrell, who, remember, still has many close contacts who continued to work for the late Queen Elizabeth II until her dying days, describing in quite intimate details what happened, but also, very significantly, the chill at Balmoral when Prince Harry arrived after her death, even without Meghan Markle. Let me take you through some of the key extracts from this part of the book. Paul Burrell writes, after her own diagnosis just a few months later, the Queen swore everyone to secrecy. Only her immediate staff were informed. Her pages, her footmen, and her dressers were included in the circle of trust and did not tell a soul. As far as the family was concerned, everything was fine. But the doctor's prognosis gave her only until Christmas. The Queen's response, God bless her, typically understated. Well, that's a shame, because next year is my Platinum Jubilee year, and I'd quite like to have seen that. Can you keep me alive for that? She endured blood transfusions and scrupulously followed doctor's orders, giving up her much-loved gin and tonics and martinis, and instead having apple juice and tomato juice on a Sunday as a treat to help her extend her life. Now, I actually know what Paul Burrell is reporting here is a fact, because I remember in the weeks before the Platinum Jubilee, walking down Oxford Street in London, just past Marble Arch, bumping into a friend of the late Queen Elizabeth II who had been very close to the Queen Mother. And she just told me, Dan, that the Queen's getting young blood. And it was these blood transfusions which did perk her up immediately. And we were so shocked to see the Queen go and open the Elizabeth line at Paddington Station. And that was a sign, oh my goodness, maybe she will be able to get through the Jubilee. Paul Burrell goes on. They kept her alive to witness this landmark in her reign, but she, through it all, knew that she was dying. Her family were told in the final few months. She had intentionally kept them out of the loop as she didn't want them to worry. She was also concerned that her illness might open the door to a regency. This was abhorrent to her. She wanted to rule to the end and definitely did not want to be a sick queen with a regent ruling. At the very end, she had good and bad days. There were some days when she couldn't get out of bed, but she always made an effort. Throughout her life, lunch was at 1 p.m, tea at 5 p.m, and dinner at 8:15 p.m. whenever possible. But she stopped going for meals in the dining room. Instead, she was having trays of food delivered to her room, and she was eating very little. The monarch was fading away in front of the nation's eyes. Her dresses weren't fitting properly, and she was looking paler and thinner. I think we all knew it was inevitable. Then, this is after her death, Burrell has insight about what happened in those very difficult hours where Meghan was uninvited to Balmoral. And he writes, Harry came through the doors of Balmoral as though he was expecting to be embraced and welcomed back into the fold, and he was sadly disappointed. He arrived late that night and was met by a total glacial front from his family. Balmoral was an iceberg. He was no longer a working royal, and he was not trusted by the family. Cold and calculating this might appear, but this is the way the Windsors work. They freeze people out, even their own, to preserve the continuity of the family. They will turn against you if you do not follow the party line and do not accept the rules and regulations of the system. Prince Harry knew those rules well. He had been taught them. He was born into the institution. That night in September, Harry joined some of his family for a somber dinner and must have realized the power of the throne had shifted. The atmosphere was Arctic. He went to bed early and got up the next morning before anyone else was awake, but when he went down to breakfast, nothing was ready. Meal times are run to a strict timetable, and Harry wanted breakfast too early. So he left with his tail between his legs in the early hours of the morning. He didn't speak to a soul and went back south. Harry had every right to be there, but the circumstances should have been so different. But Burrell adds, regardless of what he thinks of Prince Harry, you cannot help but feel sorry for him. He had come to pay his respects to his grandmother, who adored him and whom he loved. Harry's grandmother had deliberately wanted him to be happy and to stay within the royal family. But now she was no longer there to protect and guide him. They were all too busy to think about Harry's pain. There was no one there for him, no one to embrace him or understand how he was feeling. It must have been a strange and difficult time for him. Despite everything, I still wish Harry and Meghan happiness. If Harry's marriage were to flounder, which I believe may be inevitable, he will return to England to seek refuge. Everything he knows is in the country of his birth, and once the veil is lifted from his obsession with Meghan, he will want to be back to what and where he knows best, and the king would be delighted to have him back. But I am not sure if William would be equally pleased. It's such a shame, as Harry, who was always one of the public's favourite royals, could and should have had it all. Instead, he has made a right royal mess. So, Brittany, what's very interesting there, remembering Burrell's ongoing connections to many royal courtiers, is that he now believes the end of Harry and Meghan's marriage is inevitable and says categorically, Brittany, that once the marriage ends, Harry will return to England to seek refuge. Well, what? Will he return without his children?
I mean, when it comes to the end of their marriage, it is a big question mark because Meghan doesn't want to go back to the UK. She doesn't really want anything to do with the institution. She'll certainly still cling to the titles as long as she can have them, but she really has no interest in his homeland at all. And you can almost think right now of Harry doing this cosplay royal tour, trying to make inroads back to the UK, that things might be between the couple already floundering as Harry is looking to go back home. I don't think he's happy in California in many ways. I don't think his marriage is probably all that happy and productive. I think he's having a lot of issues, I'm sure, doesn't know what to do with his life. But there really is, I don't think, a permanent route back as a working royal where he was. He cannot take out those last 5 years. He can't delete the Oprah Winfrey interview. Spare is still on the shelves everywhere in new and in used bookstores. Harry and Meghan will be on Netflix forever. He can't get away from this. It will always, always be there. And because of that, Harry just really can't reclaim the family, the life he once had. It is gone. The healthy, mature thing for him to do is to figure out what the new reality for him looks like. And he's not there yet. Again, that's why he's trying to recreate it. And I'm not surprised he received a glacial welcome at Balmoral. He should not be surprised. But again, reality and Harry don't tend to get along too well.
No, indeed, indeed. And look, I mean, the thing is, Brittany, what's fascinating is for Paul Burrell to paint that picture of how Harry was treated at Balmoral. And remember, Charles and William scarpered, so they didn't even want to see Harry. By the way, I'm not criticizing them for that. I totally understand why. But Brittany, that was all before Harry and Meghan, the docuseries on Netflix. It was all before the release of Spare. So if it was Arctic then, just imagine now. He also goes into the book, Brittany, the real reason Meghan was so jealous of Kate. And effectively, it really just boils down to the fact that she wasn't happy with Kensington Palace. Like, she really just couldn't deal with the size of William and Catherine's apartment at Kensington Palace, which to me seems very short-sighted because obviously that was all to play for Meghan. And we do know in the end they were able to build this dream house to the tune of millions of pounds, which initially the British taxpayer paid for at Frogmore.
They got the big house that they wanted. But at the same time, it's sort of, they were so anticipating and wanting that so much. But at the same time, Harry and Meghan, and particularly Meghan, could not accept the reality of her place within the royal family, which is that she married the spare, and she was not going to have Frogmore House. Frogmore Cottage was best, and they got all this land, you could say, in some ways, because they got a lot of privacy through that.
Totally, Brittany. I'll let you clear your throat, and I'm going to read the next little extract, okay? Because this was so terrible. This was about Burrell revealing that Harry had actually given the late Queen Elizabeth a secret mobile phone because he wanted secret communication that her courtiers wouldn't know about and that King Charles and William wouldn't know about either. So here's the extract from Burrell. Of course, Harry would claim later that he wasn't able to get to the Queen, but he knew how to reach her whenever he wanted to see her. He also had a secret weapon. Unbeknown to his father or brother, Harry had sent Granny a mobile phone with the intention of having a secure line direct to the CEO of the family firm, bypassing not just his family, but all her courtiers. When it arrived, the Queen said, "What am I supposed to do with it?" After all, the monarch couldn't be expected to answer it whenever it rang. Imagine it going off in her handbag while she was in a meeting with the head of state or opening Parliament. So that mobile phone went in the top drawer of a servant's desk at the end of the long green corridor alongside a phone from Prince Andrew, who had had a similar plan. But even without her mobile phone, the Queen did get to see Harry and Meghan and her great-grandchildren. When Harry and Meghan appeared in the Oak Room, the family parted like the Red Sea so that the Sussexes could take centre stage with the Queen. Some members of the family left the room in disgust and wouldn't return until they had left 30 minutes later. The Queen played with the children and chatted with Harry and Meghan. She thought everything was fine, but little did she know. On the Sunday of the weekend of the Platinum Jubilee celebration, the Queen had arranged for the chef to make her favourite chocolate cake with one candle on top for Lilibet's birthday. She had hoped that her favourite grandson and his wife would join her for tea, but she was left disappointed when she was told they had left already. It might have been a breakdown in communication that Harry and Meghan weren't aware of her plans. It's a shame the tea didn't happen as Meghan never saw the Queen again, while Harry saw her next on her deathbed. So, Brittany, two interesting parts of that extract to pick up on. So let's start with that Platinum Jubilee moment, because it makes me even more disgusted that Harry and Meghan scarpered in the way they did. Because the way that it was briefed, Brittany, was always as if the late Queen totally understood and was cool with their plans. But it certainly doesn't seem like that was the case, according to Burrell's book.
No, and I wouldn't be surprised again if it was not something that the Queen was made aware of. Harry and Meghan always want to do things their way. It's a very selfish approach. And in this particular situation, they should have stayed for the whole Platinum Jubilee. I don't understand why they left early. There was a concert, there was a parade. There were things their children could have enjoyed, and they denied them that for very, very selfish reasons. And I don't know how much, and if the book says if Harry knew how close his grandmother was to passing, but this was his chance. It was 3 months before her death. This was his chance. I mean, even any of us in the public who saw her at the Platinum Jubilee knew how much weight she had lost. She was quite thin. And so this was Harry's chance to really get his children connected with his grandmother and his other royal relatives. And he just didn't do that. He left early. He skipped out on her celebrations.
Because of his selfishness and his ego, Brittany. Because I was reporting on that Platinum Jubilee, and what happened is that he was so annoyed with, do you remember the St. Paul's Cathedral event, which actually the late Queen Elizabeth II couldn't attend in the end because she had to try and save her strength for that second balcony appearance, which obviously happened and was wonderful. But he was so annoyed by where he was put in the pecking order, but also, Brittany, the way that his family treated him, because they were so disgusted. And I think maybe that was the first time that he had a realization, because even Zara and Mike Tyndall just wanted nothing to do with him. And I think that was a real wake-up call. There's another really fascinating part of this book, Brittany, and let's rewind now. Let's rewind right back to the extraordinary events of 1997, after the death of Princess Diana, when Paul Burrell has this private meeting with the late Queen Elizabeth II. This was very well documented. It was in December 1997, because remember, in the end, it's what cleared Paul Burrell, who was on trial for apparently stealing from Princess Diana's personal connection. But indeed, the late Queen said, no. Burrell told me that he was doing this in this December 1997 meeting, and the trial collapsed. In this book, Paul Burrell, the late Princess Diana's butler, has claimed that the Queen warned him to beware of sinister secret forces of which even she did not know in the wake of Princess Diana's death. This from Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack. He, of course, believes that Princess Diana was murdered. And he writes, Burrell was also an absolutely key figure for those who claim that Diana was murdered. It was to him that Diana wrote her famous note saying her husband was planning an accident in her car before her death. This weekend, he has broken cover with the publication of a new memoir in which he alleges that in 1997, the Queen told him, do be careful. There are forces at work in my country of which even I have no knowledge. Burrell's comments in the Royal Insider align with a claim made by Andrew Morton that when the Queen was informed of Diana's death in the early hours of August the 31st, 1997, she reportedly reacted by saying they must have greased her brakes. So, Brittany, Paul Burrell says he is able to speak in more detail of this meeting now, effectively because of the death of the late Queen Elizabeth II. But what do you make of this line from the Queen that he alleges that she said, do be careful, there are forces at work in my country of which even I have no knowledge?
I mean, it's so hard to say, but I do find it convenient. Of course, people do say things after people have passed because they just didn't want that publicly known at the time. But again, it's rather convenient that the Queen can't say, oh, no, I didn't say that. So I treat that with a bit of a question mark. I'm not sure if I totally buy it or not, but it is an interesting thought. I just don't see that much in relation to Diana in that way, that there was some sort of secret force, against her or something like that. Obviously, there were a lot of things going on at that time, but I don't know if I totally buy that story, but it is an interesting one to note.
Because then Brittany, he also goes on to talk about Muhammad al-Fayed for the first time since his death. Now, he was, of course, Dodi's father, and he was also the owner of Harrods. And Diana did appear to have a close relationship with him, Brittany. I mean, it was through Muhammad Fayed that she met Dodi, and she was his guest of honor. And you can see in these pictures, at various events. And obviously at the time, there was the idea that maybe Diana needed financial support. She'd had a good divorce settlement, but of course she had refused the official security on offer from the British royal family, from the government. So Fayed, of course, was a billionaire who was prepared to get out the checkbook and help Diana with all of these things. But for the first time, Paul Burrell has revealed how Diana really felt about Muhammad al-Fayed, and says that she was actually sexually harassed by him and that she described him as Yoda. So this is the reporting of it. Diana told Burrell that al-Fayed, who was twice her age, told her she would fall in love and marry his son Dodi, but then added, I want you to marry my son because in Egyptian tradition, the father goes first. I'm going to sleep with you. Burrell said that Diana replied, can you imagine me making love to Yoda? And in the book, he writes, I was appalled by his behavior. He thought that it was his right and that it would actually happen, that he would sleep with the Princess of Wales. That was on her mind throughout her romance with Dodi. On other occasions, she branded al-Fayed creepy and slimy and complained that he's always putting his hands on me. People probably wondered why she didn't stop seeing him. But after her divorce from Charles, she chose to play along because she said to me that she needed security and he could provide it. So, Brittany, this is another fascinating one because, again, there's two schools of thought here. The first is that, oh, well, it's very easy for Paul Burrell to say this now. Mohammed Al-Fayed is dead. His reputation has been completely trashed. But, I mean, I'm good friends with the Hamiltons, Christine and Neil Hamilton. And, I mean, goodness gracious me, they despise Mohammed Al-Fayed, a man who tried to ruin their lives. And by all accounts, Brittany, he was a very, very odious character then and up until his death. There are, of course, hundreds and hundreds of women who have now reported everything from rape to sexual harassment at the hands of Mohammed Al-Fayed. So in some ways, is it maybe not a surprise if Diana was also subjected to this behavior? I mean, if it was behavior that he thought that was just completely appropriate in a workplace, and then you get to this, I guess, very weird claim. I mean, I've got no idea if it's true, Brittany. I presume it's not true, but that in Egyptian culture, he's him saying that the father would sleep with his son's girlfriend. I mean, what do you think, Brittany? Is this too opportune from Burrell, or do you actually believe that Diana was subjected to this treatment at the hands of Mohammed Al-Fayed, then the owner of Harrods?
You know, in this particular instance, I would not be surprised if that was the case. And I would not be surprised either if she somewhat put up with it in order, like she said, to have a bit of security and to have somebody that maybe she can lean on. I mean, this is kind of something that has happened since the beginning of time in many ways in the relationship between men and women. And especially this picture where they're at an event, her top is a little low cut. You know, you could argue that he's leering right at her. It's hard to see if he's looking at the card.
It does look that way in that photo.
I can't say for sure what exactly he's looking at, but to me, it looks a little bit like he's leering at her chest. And so I can definitely see this being a possibility. And although I'm sure she was very fed up with it as well, if he could offer her money and vacations and those sorts of things, in some instances that might have been really helpful to her. And so if it didn't go too far, she was willing to let some of it slide. Sadly, that happens to be the case many times, but in terms of just women and men in general sometimes. But I think in this instance, this claim has a bit more credence to me than the one about the Queen. So I would argue I could definitely see that being the case.
It is interesting, Brittany. And what do you think of the fact that there is all of this renewed focus on Princess Diana at the moment? A lot of it is as a result of the speculation, I guess, that Prince Harry is not only planning this Netflix documentary, but could also potentially be plotting to go further in terms of his feelings that she was potentially unalived, or that her death was mysterious and that there are questions to answer. And I mean, indeed, in a lot of ways, you could argue that there are.
When it comes to her death, I mean, the simplest answer usually in most cases is the correct one, which is that they were in a car accident and they had a drunk driver and nobody was wearing a seatbelt. That is the simplest answer to what happened to Diana. And the definite fear for Harry is that because I think he is, again, not really all that connected to reality anymore, is that he could definitely go down the route of all these conspiracy theories surrounding Princess Diana. I mean, we just got past about a week or so ago the anniversary of her death. And so there is some general renewed interest around this time of year. But in the future, it would just be nice, and I'm sure William, I can't really speak to him, but I'm sure William would appreciate if we just sort of left her at peace and didn't try to constantly regurgitate, the rumors and the speculation and all these sorts of things that are not really helpful. I've always said, I think would be great, especially for Harry, who obsesses, I think, about her death probably a bit more than William does, is wouldn't it be great if his stance would be, hey, wear a seatbelt. Like, a seatbelt can save your life. That should be Harry's campaign, rather than, I think, regurgitating conspiracy theories or blaming the paparazzi, which did play a role, but there were a lot of factors here. And I think it's just best to let her rest. Let's not go over this again and again and again. I don't think either way anybody will get the answers that'll satisfy them. So best in some ways to let sleeping dogs lie at this point.
Oh my goodness, that is definitely what Prince William would want, without any doubt. But I don't think, given where his brother's head is at, both psychologically and financially, remember, there's a financial motivation here, Brittany. I don't think William is going to be left satisfied with Harry's behavior on this front. But Brittany, absolutely fascinating stuff. For so much more of Brittany, make sure you subscribe to the Royal News Network on YouTube. Thank you for getting through with the little tickle in your throat, Brittany. You did so well.
Prince Harry is once again making headlines, with reports claiming he is considering a return to England for refuge as part of a so-called post-marriage plan. But how much of this is actually true, and how much is driven by speculation? The headline uses powerful and emotional language, with words like desperate and refuge immediately creating a sense of urgency and drama, even before any real evidence is presented. At the center of the story is the idea that Prince Harry may have a plan to return to the UK, possibly as a fallback if his current situation changes, but this claim is not supported by any confirmed official statements. Prince Harry has deep roots in the United Kingdom, including family ties, history, and responsibilities, so any mention of returning to England naturally attracts attention and speculation. The word refuge suggests escape or protection, which adds emotional weight to the story, even though there is no clear evidence that Harry is seeking shelter or distancing himself in that way. The idea of a post-Meghan Markle marriage plan introduces a narrative of relationship trouble, but there is no verified information confirming any separation or breakdown. This type of story relies heavily on framing, where ordinary possibilities, like visiting or spending time in the UK, are presented as signs of something much more dramatic. Stories like this often reference unnamed insiders or vague reports, which makes the claims difficult to verify and easier to interpret in different ways. Royal family stories combined with relationship drama naturally attract attention, and adding words like desperate and refuge makes the story even more compelling to viewers. What is actually known is limited to Prince Harry's public appearances and his ongoing life in the United States, while deeper claims about his intentions remain unconfirmed. Without direct confirmation, the entire narrative becomes speculative, built more on interpretation than on solid, verifiable facts. It is important for viewers to approach these headlines critically, recognizing the difference between factual reporting and storytelling designed to engage and provoke reactions. This situation reflects a broader trend in celebrity media, where ongoing narratives are maintained through repeated speculation, even when new evidence is limited or non-existent. So what do you think? Could Prince Harry really be planning a return to England, or is this just another example of exaggerated royal drama? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to always question what you see in viral headlines.